Hello there! In this video, we're going to be going through Firebase authentication and security rules. About a year ago, I released a course called Build a Mobile App with Firebase, where we built a cute little app using the Firebase real-time database. This is how it looks. It's a simple shopping list app where you can keep track of things that you need to get from the store. So I've already got a couple of items on my list. I can add something more, let's say bananas. And there you go. It gets added. And when you're at the store and you're getting the items, you can just press on everything you've put in your cart and they disappear. Now, people really liked this course when it was released, but the number one request that I've gotten from people is, how do I make my app private and secure? How do I make it so that you have to log in before you can use the app and only I have access to my shopping list items? And in this video, we're gonna go exactly through this. But if you haven't taken my course, you can still watch this video. Just know that we're starting with a completed app, which we're building on top of. Now, you're probably watching this on YouTube, but if you wanna see all of the code that I'm going through in this video, you can get access to the interactive Scrimba version by following the link in the description, where you'll be able to access any of the code at any point in the video. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get started. So let's go through the code first. So as you know already, we've built this simple app here, and this is how the HTML code looks like. We have a div class container, we have an image of a cat, and then an input field, and then the button right here, and then we got a shopping unordered list, which are all of these items being listed. I'm not going to go through the CSS. If you want, you can do that by yourself. Now let's have a look at the JavaScript. So at the top here, we've got some import statements where we're importing the functions that we need from Firebase. And then we've got our database URL here, which is the real-time database that we have set up here. So I've already gone ahead and done that. And as you can see, we have a reference called shopping list, and inside is where all of our items are as simple strings. The security rules right now are set to true and true, which means that anyone can use our app, anyone can read, and anyone can write. This is what we're going to be fixing later on in this video. Okay, we've got our DOM element set up here, and then we have some Firebase setup where we're creating an app object using the initialize app function and the app settings that we've got set up here. Then we've got the database object and then the reference, which we need because we need to specify where in the database we want to be pushing items. And we've called it shopping list. We got the input field, the add button, and the list of items here. When we press this button, we are fetching the input field value, whatever the value is when you've written something in here, and we're pushing that into the shopping list in DB reference, and the value we're pushing is the input value, the string. That's going in right here. Let's test it out with another thing in here. Let's do Kiwi and click, and there you go, it's added here, okay? The ID that we have is just something generated by Firebase. It's a unique ID that Firebase generates by default. We don't need to worry about that. And then we're just clearing this field after we've pressed this button, after we're done. And then we have the onValue function, which is what is updating every single time something new gets pushed to the database. Every time that happens, this whole function runs every single time. And we're running a loop here, and we're just rendering all of the items here. And if we don't have any items, we're just showing no items here yet. And then we got some other functions here for some simple functionality. And then it's this append item to shopping list function, which is what is creating all of these items. Because if we click them, it's deleting it from the database. And for that, the code is right here. Then we're using create element here to actually create everything. Okay, that's it. I think you get it now. Let's now get started writing some code. So the first thing I'm thinking about is that we start with authentication. We want to make it so that we can put a button up here that says continue with Google. And you can press that button and it's going to show a pop-up, and you can pick the Google account that you want and it's going to log you in. So that is what should be shown at the beginning. You need to be required to log in before we get to this page, okay? So let's go in and fix the HTML for that. So currently we just have this div container where all the stuff is, right? We're going to go in here and we're going to put in a section tag. We're going to section our app into two different sections: the view that is logged in view and logged out view. Okay, so I'm going to put this in as view logged in. There we go. I'm going to close that. Perfect. And I'm going to just copy this and paste it down here and say view logged in. Actually, this is the view logged in. This one is the view logged out. There we go. And we're going to indent this properly. And we're going to section close that tag. There we go. And what we want to do for the view logged in is basically just copy this. And we're going to keep the cat. We're going to get rid of the input field. And we're going to have a button there which says continue with Google. Continue with Google. And we're going to make the ID of that continue with Google. Or actually, let's make it a little bit shorter. It's a bit too long. Google button is good enough. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Let's run that. There we go. Okay, looking pretty good. But we are currently being shown both of these at the same time, right? Which is not good. So I'm going to go into the CSS and go all the way up here. And using a hashtag so that we can refer to the IDs, I'm going to say view logged in, and I'm going to say display none. So that goes away, okay? We're going to, by default, hide both of these using the CSS. And then we're going to use JavaScript to dynamically show the view that should be shown based on if you're logged in or not. So let's actually copy this again and do a view logged out and put that as none as well. Okay, so now we just have a blank screen, which is what we want right now. Okay, with that set up, we're going to go into Firebase and we're going to go on the left side to build and to authentication. And then we're going to get started. Okay, so what is the sign in method that we want to use here? You have two different options, basically, two sets of options. You have native providers where you can do email, password, or phone or something like that. Or you can use a third-party provider like Google, Facebook, GitHub, and all that, okay? The easiest way to go about this is just using Google because pretty much everyone in the world has a Google account at this point. So we're going to use that. But the process for everything else is very similar to that, okay? So let's go with Google and we're going to enable this. And we are going to pick our email for the support email for project. And then we're going to save that. There we are, perfect. Now we got that enabled. One thing which is very, very important, is to go into settings and under authorized domains, you want to add in the domain of your app. What does that mean? In our case, that's going to be Scrimba because that's where we're coding this thing, right? So I'm going to add in Scrimba here. So when Scrimba tries to access Firebase Authentication, this is a whitelisted domain. So it gets permission to do that. So if you're deploying your app using Netlify or Vercel or whatever it might be, you have to put in the full URL in here for it to work. Otherwise, it's gonna get blocked, okay? So very important thing to note. Okay, with that set up, we can go into users, which is where all of our users are going to be listed. Right now, there's none, of course. And now let's go back to our code into the JavaScript and let's get rid of this for a while. And we're going to go here and do another import statement, this time from Firebase auth. So we're going to say this and from, and we're going to just copy this and say Firebase auth. There we go. So see, every time we use a new service like database or authentication or Firestore, we have to do some setup. And in this case, it's close to the get database, but of course it's called get auth in this case. And then we go down here and under the database, I'm going to make a new const and call it auth and equal that to get auth. And we have to obviously feed it the app object. There we go. Now we have an object inside of our code called auth, which is going to be something that is going to give us all of the authentication information about the user, whether we are authenticated or not, whether the user is logged in or logged out, all of that good stuff we're going to get using auth. So that's the first step. And then we need to find a way to figure out if we're logged in or logged out. We need to be able to run some code depending on if we're authenticated or not. Well, what do you know? Firebase has a perfect function for this, and it's called onAuth state changed. And we're going to run that, call that rather, down here. We're going to say on auth state changed. There we go. And then we're going to give it auth. It needs to have the auth object first. Then we have a function in here, which has a user object inside of it. And inside here, we can write a simple if statement. We're going to say if user. If there is a user object and it's not null, then we know that the user is logged in which case we're going to do this, which is just going to be a simple console log for now. We're going to say logged in, and then we're going to say else console log logged out, and that's it. So far, that's all we need to do. See how simple that is? Just a simple if statement. Let's see what we get now. So if we run this, what should we get? Logged in or logged out? Obviously, we should get logged out, right? Let's see. And we get an error, of course, because I forgot to do a basic thing, which is add some credentials to the app settings. So we need to go back here and into the project settings. And let's go down here. Remember when you were building the app before, following my course, we were only dealing with the real-time database. That's why we only have that in here. But now that we're using authentication as well, we need to add something here. And that is going to be these two lines, API key and auth domain. So let's copy both of those. It doesn't matter if it's from CDN or NPM. And we go here and we put that right at the top. And there we go. Now, hopefully, now it'll work. Let's run that and we get logged out, which is exactly what we should expect, right? Okay, now let's make sure that we can go into the CSS. And remember, by default, we're not showing any of the two sections. Let's make it so that based on if you're logged in or out, the correct section is shown. So let's go here and just double check what we named those. View logged out. Let's do that first. And we're going to create the objects up here first. So let's do const view logged out. There we go. And document get element by ID and view logged out. Perfect. And the same thing for view logged in. There we go. Okay, so let's copy this one and let's go in here. So when the user is logged in, which one of them should show? Well, it's the view logged in that should show, right? So let's get rid of this and do view logged in, and we'll say style so we can access the styles, and then we can access the display property and change it from whatever it is, currently none, right? And change it to block. So we can actually show it. I hope this is going to work. We might need to change it to something else. But let's do the same thing for view logged out. And we're going to do none for that, obviously, right? Because one of them should show, the other one shouldn't. And we're just going to flip that for this one. None and block. Alrighty, let's see. Run that. Okay, yes, it seems to be working. We're only being shown the logged out view. Perfect. Okay, what's next? Now let's see if we can get this button working. When we press this button, a pop-up should appear that lets us use a Google account to log in. Which function do we need for that? For that, we have a function called sign in with pop-up. And before that, we actually need another thing called Google auth provider. So since we're using a third-party provider like Google, we need to specify that in our code so we know that we're using Google, and we do it using this thing. So in here, we're going to have to do an additional setup step here, which is just const provider, and we say new Google auth provider like this. Why is the new keyword here? Well, because this is a class that we're using from which we're creating an object. So it's different from using a function. If you don't know what that means, don't worry too much about it. But just know that you have to do this step in order to specify that this is Google. And we would do a similar step if we were using, God forbid, Facebook or GitHub or anything like that. Okay, anyway, once that is set, let's now use sign in with pop-up. And for that, we need to first write some code for this button. So I'm going to go down here and say const continue with Google button L element. And we're going to say get element by ID, and we're going to say, which one was that? I forgot the name. Google button. Google button like that. Okay, once we have that, we can go here and let's put that right up here, and we'll do add event listener, right? And we do click, and let's do a function in there, and inside of this function is where we want to call this sign in with pop-up function. Okay, and this function takes in two different things. First, the auth object. It has to take an auth object because it's an auth function, right? And then it also takes in the provider object that we created here. So it knows that we're dealing with Google. Okay, once those two are given, we can do a dot then, because this is a promise that we're dealing with here. So we're doing then, and then in there, let's just do the result, and we'll do a function like this. There we go. And in this case, let's just console log logged in with Google. And in the case of an error, we can do catch, and we'll say error, and then we got a console log, and then we'll just console log the error code, okay? If you don't quite understand this code, don't worry too much about it. Just read up on promises. Basically what's happening here is that when you call this function, there are two things that you can get. You can either get something successful. In this case, you actually get what you want and you're logged into Google, or you get something that happened that shouldn't happen, an error. And in that case, we are catching the error and we're console logging the error code. We're dealing with both outcomes there. Okay, so let's see. If we run this now, and if I click this, I got a pop-up here. There we go. This is how the pop-up looks like. I got a lot of accounts, but I'm just showing two of them here. I'm going to choose my main account, and we're going to go down here, and we are going to say continue. And we're going to wait a second, and we're logged into the account. Do you see? We're logged into our app now, and we can see everything here. If we go into Firebase, we'll be able to go into authentication, and now under users, we have our new user created. The email, the provider, when it was created, when we were last signed in, and the unique user ID. This is going to be super, super important in this video, so we're going to come back to this. But this is a unique way to identify every single user inside of our project. Okay, now that we have that working, we have to have a way to sign out of this thing, because right now we're logged in, but there's no way to sign out. So we got to go ahead and do that. And for that, we are just going to add a little H3 tag at the very top that's going to say log out, and we can just press that. Okay, it's not going to look super nice, but it's the easiest way to do this thing. So let's go into index and go and right here, and we'll say H3, and we're going to say log out like this, and we're going to give it an ID of log out maybe, be consistent there, button. And once we have that, it's put on the left side. We got to fix that. So let's go in here and we'll say H3, and we'll say text align center. Should fix that. And let's also give it a nice effect so that when we hover over it, we do an underline so that we know that we're actually, hovering over it. Hover, and we'll say cursor, pointer, and we're gonna also do text decoration, underline. There we go. Okay, let's see. And there we go. Beautiful. So let's go back to the HTML and the JavaScript rather, and we're going to go up here and we're going to say const log out button L, and we're going to say document get element by ID, and it was log out button, I believe. Okay, so we copy this and we go down here and we say add event listener and click and function. What do we want to do when we click on this? We want to just call a simple function, the simplest function there is in the world, and it's called sign out. That's it. And all it takes is, of course, the auth object, right? And it kind of flips it. So it goes from auth object being something like an object with a bunch of stuff in it, like user information and everything, to turning it into null. So we know that no one is currently authenticated. Those are the two different states of the auth object. Okay, let's put that right here because we do have to import that, otherwise this doesn't work. And now, hopefully, when we run this, we are going to be able to click this and go back to the main page. And there we go. Yes, logged out. Perfect. Let's try it again. Sign in, and I am going to sign in now with my Scrimba account. And we are now logged in, okay? And as we can see here under users, if we refresh this, we now should have two different accounts. There we go. Perfect. But now we have a problem because I am getting access to information that doesn't belong to me. All of this stuff was created by the original user, right? So this is where we come to security rules. So we need to make sure that when we log in, the stuff that we put into the cart is only visible to the person that created that. Okay. For that, let's go into the real-time database and have a look at how our data is structured so far. So right now, we have this thing, of course, we got to dismiss it because it's saying that our app is completely insecure. And we're going to fix that, of course. So let's just dismiss that for now. Right now, we have a reference called shopping list, under which there are items where you have a unique ID and then the string for the item. Now we need to transform this into something else that takes into account that multiple users can be using the same app. The easiest and most straightforward way to do this in Firebase is actually delete this. This should take it away from here. And instead of having a shopping list reference, we have a users reference, under which we have all the different users that are currently using the app with the unique ID of the user. Remember, every user has a unique ID. And under there is where they can each have their own personal shopping list. If that didn't make any sense, don't worry, it's going to make sense when we implement it right now. So the first thing we're going to do here is go in here and we're going to change the way that we're storing data on Firebase. Okay, so let's go here. So right here is where we are pushing the data, right? So instead of referring to the shopping list in DB, we're not actually going to do that. So we're going to actually delete this from here. We don't need to have it here now. We're going to actually recreate this in different places in the code that is local to the function that we're using. Okay, so because this one is global. And so we're just going to delete this from now. Okay, now before we can do that, we need a way to access the unique ID for each person using the app when they are signed in. This one right here. How do we get that? Well, there are different ways of doing that, but if we go down here, for example, on auth state changed, we have the user object inside of here. So the easiest way to do this would be just to do console log and then user, okay? Let's see what that gets us. Now we do get an error here because of shopping list in DB, but we do get this whole object here where we have the display name and the email and everything. Now we don't actually need all of that. All we need is the UID, the unique identifier. And if we do that, we can see that it console logs my unique user ID. Okay, perfect. But right now, we are only able to access that because of this user object, but we can only do that inside of here. What if we needed to get to that same information from anywhere else in the code? Well, thankfully, we have a global object called auth, and it can provide us with what we need. So another way to do the same thing would be not to use user, but do auth and then do current user and then do .uid. Let's see if that works. There we go. We are getting the user ID once again. Perfect. Okay, so let's go with that then. All right, so let's delete this. And inside of here, we are going to say, actually, we can turn this let to a const. Actually, there's no need to have it as a let. We're going to do another const, and we're going to say user shopping list in DB. And we're going to say ref. We're going to create a reference, And obviously we need to give it the database object first. We always need to do that. And then before, remember, we had a shopping list, right? Just that. But we can't do that right now. We need to first do users. So we're going to create that now. And we're going to do template strings like this. And we're going to say users. That's always going to be the first thing. We're going to have a users reference, and inside of there live all the users. How can we refer to the currently logged in users? Well, we just did it, right? So let's do $, and then go in here and we'll say .auth and then current user. Let's get rid of this, and then .uid. That gives us that weird unique user ID. Once we have that, we do another one of these, and then we go shopping list. Now we have it, okay? Now we have it local under each user. Okay. And then once we have that, let's create another space here just for some breathing room, and we'll just change this from this to that. And we're actually gonna, there are some other places where we are using shopping list in app 2 in DB, which is right here, which we're gonna have to change in a little bit too, because this doesn't exist anymore, right? But let's see if this is working or not. Okay, we're now logged in. Now let me add some bread in here. Click. And I think it's not working because of the error, so we got to fix that. So let's actually get rid of this whole thing for now and come back to it in just a little bit. Hopefully that doesn't mess up things. There we go. Okay, so of course nothing is being shown for now, but let's just make sure that we can actually push our item in the correct way and it gets saved in here in the right way in the real-time database. Because currently it's empty, and it did actually add it here. Let's try that once more. Let's run this, and we're gonna do, let's do Coca-Cola, and click. And we get this users, right? And then inside of there is the unique user ID for me in this case, which is the same thing as we have right here, remember? And then inside of there again, we have the shopping list. And inside of there, I have my personal shopping list. So this is the structure of the data. And other users are gonna get listed under here and so on and so forth. Beautiful. Now let's go back here, and we need to fix our onValue function. But before we do, we have to change it a little bit, because remember, onValue only should be run when a user is logged in this case, right? We don't really want it to be running in here, because in this case, the user is logged out. So we're gonna say function, we're gonna create a new function called fetch from DB. And inside of here is where we're gonna paste in the onValue function that we had from before. And this function, we are going to call from inside of here. Every time the user is logged in or the auth state is changed, only when the user is logged in should this be called. And of course, right now, it's also referring to the shopping list in DB, which we had before, but we deleted. So we got to make sure that that also works. So we're going to go inside of here and just make a const and call it user shopping list in DB. And we're going to use the ref function, and we're going to say database. And then here, it's actually going to be the same thing as before, right? It's going to be template strings and then users slash, and then the user unique user ID, which is what we can get by auth current user.uid, and then say shopping list under there. This is where it should be fetched from. Once we have that, we can just replace this with that. And then hopefully now this should go back to working. Oh, we got an error here because I added one too many R's. Current. There we go. Now we have Coca-Cola. And then now let's see if we can add some more stuff here. So let's do some more fruit, apples, and let's do salad, and we'll do tuna. There we go. And we got all of these going in here. Perfect. Now let's try to log out from here and go into my other account. So I was logged in using my Scrimba email. I'm gonna now use my Gmail. There we go. And now let's add in something here. Let's do Monster, and we'll do chocolate. There we are. Now let's go in here and see, okay, so now see, we have another user. So we have two different users and all of that data is in here. So this is how to beautifully structure our data because this really makes sense. Now we do have a problem here though. Let me show you the problem. So if I were to go in here, this is me logged in, okay? This is using one of my email accounts, which is this one right here. Now, if I were to go in here and copy this UID manually and go into the code and say, regardless of who is logged in, when you're doing the fetching, don't fetch me the currently logged in user UID, but fetch me this one, which I'm hard coding in. Now, in our app, this shouldn't work because it shouldn't get us those, right? Because those items don't belong to me, but it's working. I'm able to see this. Why? Well, now we get to security rules because currently we are allowing anyone and everyone in the world to read or write anything that they want. So let's fix that now. So security rules when it comes to the real-time database is just JSON, which you worked with before. And so inside of here, we're using curly brackets to say that both read and write is set to true. If we wanted to, we could set both of these to false. And now we make the most secure app in the world because now no one else is going to be able to get the data. If we go back here and run, then it's going to go away, right? Nothing is being fetched. And this is exactly what we want to happen right now because this is not my unique user ID, it's the other ones. So this is what we should see. When we need to get here by first changing this back to true and true. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go in here and specify our data structure, the way that our data is structured. Remember, if we make another tab here, we need to be able to first access this place, the users. So we need to specify that here by saying users like this. And we can open and close curly brackets right there. And let's delete this for now. Now inside of here, what do we have? Well, then after this, we want to get the unique user ID, right? Which is this. But how do we get it? Because it's different for each user. Well, then it's dynamic data. It's basically a variable. So in that case, we can again do quotation marks, but now we do $ and then it gives us UID. That's the one that we want. So now it understands dynamically where we are here. Okay. Once we have that, we do another set of curly brackets, and inside of here is where we do the reading and writing. So let's do read first, and let's do colon. Now there are two different things we need to do here. We need to first make sure that a person is authenticated. The first step is not to check if it's the right user, but is to check that someone is actually authenticated. And for that, we have this object here, the auth object, which has two different states. You either have an auth object with things inside of it, or it's equal to null, in which case a person is not authenticated. So those are the two different states. So the first rule that we need to write here is, and we're going to do quotation marks here, we're going to say auth should not be equal to null. Okay, so that's the first part, making sure that the auth object is not null, which has to mean that the user is authenticated. Let's make sure that we do this for both reading and writing. Perfect. Let's publish that and see if that works. Let's run this now. And now we should get this, right? Because someone is authenticated. It's not the correct person, but someone is authenticated. So now we're getting this. And now if we change this back to be auth.currentUser.uid, that should also give us, in this case, the correct elements here, these two. Okay, now let's go back to the other one and make the items come up here that are not the ones that we want and write the rules so that these disappear as well. Okay, now for the second part, we are going to say and so in this case, both the first statement should be true and the second statement should be true. And in this case, we're going to say auth dot, you see? When we say dot, we have a couple of things that we get access to. One of them is the UID, which is exactly what we want. This is going to be our unique user ID. So we're making sure here, this part is the authenticated object. When someone is logged in, what is the unique user ID of the person that's logged in? That's this. This has to be equal to, exactly equal to, this thing right up here, we got to make sure that in our data, inside of the database, this thing right here is the same as inside of here, the auth object's user UID. When those two things are the same, then we have it unlocked. Then we know that we should show the data to the person who's logged in. Okay, so I'm going to just say $sign is going to pop up here, user UID, right? UID, and that's it. So let's publish that and see if that works now. So let's run this and see, nothing is being shown because this is the wrong user UID. So we're not being shown anything. But if we go back now to this auth current user UID and run that, now we get the items inside of here. Perfect. Now we also want to make sure that the currently authenticated user can only write their own items and not for anyone else. So this user right here should not be able to write inside of this place, right? We got to make sure of that. It's a little bit difficult to do inside of the app, but you never know. So let's make sure to write that explicitly. Let's go here and we'll say here as well, we want to do and auth UID and equal that to this one. There we go. Perfect. And now we finally have a secure app. So let's test it once again and see if we have anything remaining. So I've got my app right here and I can delete stuff. Oh, of course. We totally forgot to do that. When we're clicking this code is running and we didn't even update this code, right? So if you're watching this could be a challenge that you can do by yourself. Try to update this code so it reflects the changes that we made to the structure of the data. I'm going to quickly go ahead and do this now. So we're going to say /user, users, and then we're going to say auth.currentUser.uid. There we go. And that should give it the exact item that we're looking for here, and we click and we delete, right? And it's got deleted from here. Perfect. Click and click. There we go. And we can add another bread, and we'll do butter and milk. And then I'm going to log out and continue with Google. And then I'm going to log into the other one. There we go. Oh, that was the original one. Okay, let me log into the other one. There we are. Do you see? Now we only see the items that we should see. Now, if you could notice, there was a little split second where you could see that the other items from the other logged in user turned into this one. I don't know if you could see that, but go back in the video and try to see. There was just a split second where that happened. And I want to make sure that that doesn't happen because that is the data from the other user, right? So let's fix that. The easiest way to fix that would be to just run this code, clear shopping list L, when we are changing the on auth state change, this one right here. And we're just going to say manually just clear the shopping list L first and then fetch. Hopefully that's going to take care of that. Let's see. Log out, log in. Let me go into the first one. Oh, it didn't fix that. Actually, I think I put it in the wrong place. I think we got to remove it from here and put it in here. Fetch from DB. Do that first. Let's see. I might have this wrong, but let's see. There we go. We got these. Let's log out and then log into the second account. There we go. See? Now it's removed. Now let's try it one more time just to make sure. Just to make sure. Let's go into the first one now. And see, now it's not there. So you can't see the split second of the DOM element changing. So we took care of that by just clearing everything and then running this fetch from DB function, which is being called every time this is changing. Okay, these are the small things that you gotta just look out for, right? And do the fixes for. And that's all I had for you in this video. Now you have all the knowledge you need to go out there and make your own little personalized apps where you not only use the real-time database that Firebase has to offer, but you also make sure that you can let users log in using their Google accounts, and you can make sure that the apps are secure so everyone can only see their own data. If you have any questions, thoughts, or comments for me, feel free to leave it in the comments below. And if you have any requests for more Firebase content that you'd like to see, also make sure to write that down below. And with that, I'll see you next time.